What's up, YouTubers and plant lovers? It's Justin coming to you from the Big Blue Nation once again. And today, I was going to talk to you about a pretty good score. Now, I know a lot of you have probably seen these pitcher plants. They're really just kind of random carnivorous plants that random companies put out there in hopes that they look really interesting and they can do amazing things if you have certain kind of problems. But the one that I have is a tropical pitcher plant. Now, this one is called Nepenthes ventricosa, is its Latin name. It is a really easy pitcher plant to grow. It is a tropical pitcher plant, as I said. It is up there with Nepenthes alata and Nepenthes sanguinea. Those are some other ones that are fairly easy and pretty common pitcher plants that you'll find around here that are really easy to take care of. And they do the most wonderful thing in the world, and they eat other bugs. So if you do have a lot of plants, kind of like I do, and you've exhausted all kinds of other possibilities of how to kill them or get rid of the bugs or pests in a organic kind of way, try your luck with sundews or any kind of pitcher plants or anything else of that nature that is carnivorous that'll actually kind of help you out and do a majority of the work for you. Now, I got this one today at Lowe's, but I've seen them at Myers, I've seen them at Kroger, I've seen them at Home Depot. I mean, just any of the really big box stores that dabble in some kind of plants or whatever they have. So this is a really good one to have. It's really beautiful, and this one actually looks really good. I think I just got it whenever they had just gotten their truck. It does have one dead pitcher in the back, but for the price, I think I got a pretty good deal. Now, I think they sell these for around $10. And, you know, it actually comes in this clear kind of container, and that's meant to really kind of help the plant hold in a lot of moisture and kind of give it a little greenhouse effect so that the water will kind of stay in there and it'll stay hydrated and it'll stay warm and kind of cozy and comfortable for this plant. Now, this specific plant, Nepenthes ventricosa, is native actually to the islands of the Philippines. There's around 3 islands that it's been recorded on: Luzon, Panay, and Sibayan? Something like that. These islands are just north of the equator, and those 3 islands specifically are in the northern part of the Philippines. So this plant really is a tropical plant. This guy really does not go dormant because he's used to kind of really warm tropical weather all year round. So when deciding where to set him, keep that in mind. It says on the back of this box that you can kind of set it in a sunny windowsill. As long as it's got adequate water and sunlight, you can pretty much forget about the plant. And I kind of agree with them. Now, I will put mine in a south-facing window. It really needs just a little bit of direct sunlight a day, maybe just a couple of hours, because in its native environment, it's actually from the highland areas, kind of around the mountains and the rainforest of the Philippines. And I think they found it at heights of 1,000 to 2,000 meters above sea level. So it does like to be up there a little bit. So like I said, they kind of go on the hillsides or mountains of the areas. I mean, normally they're shaded by grasses and shrubs. So I know it does say that they come from the tropical areas, and they do seem to kind of get a little bit of sunlight, but not a ton. So you don't want to burn your plant up. But if you notice that your plant isn't producing any pitchers at all, that is probably because it's not getting the right amount of sunlight. So you can also tell by the pictures too, if they're really red, that means they're actually getting a lot of sunlight, and that actually is kind of beneficial to them. But like I said, they will burn the leaves, so I wouldn't go any more than about 3, maybe 4 hours of direct sunlight a day. And really it just depends on when you bought your plant, because a lot of the times these don't always sell, so they do kind of sit in stores for a while and out of the sunlight. So when you get yours, I would introduce it back into the sunlight slowly, because you never know how long this guy sat in a big box store on the shelf and not really had a whole bunch of good sunlight. So introduce them slowly. Now I'm going to be using my sanitized pruning shears because they put tape all over this thing. So gently just kind of cut into it. Take your time. I really don't understand why they do that, but they put a piece of plastic around it more. I think it's mainly just to kind of hold the air or the water in to keep it from evaporating, because I'm sure they anticipate these to sit on the store shelves for quite some time. So you can't really just kind of pull it out. I guess you could really slide it out, but then you run the risk of running water and all kinds of other stuff. So if you can, just kind of the bottom collapses and kind of push it up through there a little bit until you can kind of grab onto the pot. Now pay extra close attention to the pitchers. You don't want to pinch those off and actually kill them. And as I was saying, they use this to kind of keep the sphagnum moss down and to keep it kind of insulated and so that it won't really evaporate. So you don't want to take it and rub it and kind of grab it all of a sudden and pull it off, because you will damage your pitchers. So with your sanitized pruning shears, go ahead and cut into the plastic, and this will make removal of it way easier. And take care not to puncture any leaves or any pitchers. Now, you'll have sphagnum moss that's kind of come up a little bit. That's fine. Just kind of take your finger, kind of mush it back down in there to where the sphagnum moss is about level with the container that it's in. Now, I've gotten one before, and the sphagnum moss, I guess it had tumped over and all the sphagnum moss was all out of it. Take a look at the plant. If you notice that it does have green leaves and not really much in the way of dead pitchers, it still kind of looks good. I would go ahead and purchase it, because you really can get more sphagnum moss and just apply it there after you kind of just set it on there dry. And then you can kind of spray it or add water to it, or you can soak the sphagnum moss and kind of put it in there soaking wet, whatever you prefer. But the pot that it's in is a really good kind of pot for it. Just make sure that it does have adequate draining hose. This one seems to have 4. And the first thing you really should do after you pull it out is kind of water it. Now mine, like I said, I'm pretty sure I've gotten mine earlier in the shipping cycle for this plant, so it looks relatively fine. The pitchers are starting to dry up just a little bit, so I will kind of add water in here, and he should be fine. Now, what I'll do is get a little saucer and set the pot down in the saucer and water it until a little bit of water has come out the bottom of the drainage holes, and then I'll check it every day and add water occasionally. Now, it says that you can go ahead and let the excess water run free as long as the sphagnum moss is pretty well saturated. Your plant will be just fine, but you can leave just a little bit of water in the bottom of the saucer because the plant really will drink it back up. It really does need to be saturated. It doesn't need to be excessively saturated though, so you do want to let some of the excess water drain out, but not all of it. I keep about maybe a ½ inch to an inch of water in my saucer, and before I add new water in, I'll dump the old water out, because if you just leave it sitting in there all day, it'll get all nasty and yucky and mildewy, and that's not good for your plant. But like I said, with light, you want to put it in like a south or a west facing window and get just a couple hours of direct sunlight a day, and that'll be fine. And with water, they do like to be saturated, but they don't need to be drowning or waterlogged rather. So when choosing water, you want to use either rainwater, some well water is okay, and distilled water. That's what I always use. Go to Kroger, it's like 84 cents a gallon, and use it on your plants that need adequate water, like your orchids or your ferns and your pitcher plants, or other bog plants like your sundews, bladderworts, Venus flytraps, or your sarracenias, or any kind of American pitcher plants. They all like a lot of bog conditions too with excess water. But I always just use distilled water because any hard water is really bad for your plant, and softeners use a lot of salt to soften, so that is really bad for your plant, especially your pitcher plants, because that will dry them up really quickly. So I just use regular distilled water. Soil, I only use sphagnum moss. Now you can use 1 part sphagnum moss to 1 part perlite. Perlite is just kind of a volcanic glass that's been superheated until it pops, and it kind of turns into like a little round white material that aids in aeration. It really kind of helps air get around the roots, and it also kind of helps with water retention and drainage. So perlite really does kind of help. As I was saying, you can do 1 part sphagnum moss and 1 part perlite, or you can just do like I do and just kind of put 100% sphagnum moss down in there, because that really helps with the water retention. And they don't really need a whole lot in the way of nutrients either. Feeding or fertilizing these guys, really you don't really have to. They get all the adequate food or nutrition they need from any of the bugs that they capture in their pitchers, so they really don't need to be fed at all. If you want to and you have your plant indoors all the time, you can place a bug in its pitcher about once a month, and that should be fine per pitcher. And if you feed it too much, I don't think that's really going to be a problem with bugs. But I've also found that you can use kind of like the granular fertilizer. Take 1 little kind of granule of like Osmocote, place it in the pitchers. But I would kind of recommend kind of steering away from that, because if you use too much of that, you can burn the plant out or the pitcher. So also just kind of, I always do kind of, when the pitchers get bigger, I do kind of spray some water in there in the pitchers, because if the pitchers dry out, they'll get all brown and crusty and die off. So you don't want them to dry out. So the soil pH, you can kind of keep it as around 6 to 1, to where it's pretty acidic, or all the way up to kind of like 6.5, which is like a mild acidic, but they can go kind of neutral too, around 7. So that's kind of where they stand with the soil pH. Temperature, these guys cannot survive frost. I wouldn't even expose them to temperatures around 50 degrees or below, so around 55 and up would be kind of the extreme end too. So you shouldn't let it get too far below 60 degrees because this is a tropical plant. The Sarracenias that are native to America, the purple pitcher plants, they can withstand freezing, but these guys cannot. So I wouldn't let it go down around a little bit colder than 60 degrees. But if you have it outside in the hotter part of the summers, make sure it has adequate water and that it's out of the direct sunlight in the hottest part of the day. I think with these guys, they can be around the USDA zones of 10 to 11. So they are nowadays kind of found in California and like Kissimmee, Florida. So areas around that, they do grow natural now. But if it's colder than that, you're going to keep it in a pot and bring it in around the fall. I would say early fall, if even. You can use artificial light. I use LEDs, but if you're going to use any kind of other lights besides LEDs or CFLs or anything like that, you want to be very careful because the high pressure sodiums can get really hot and dry your plant out. So make sure there is adequate space between your pot and your plant and the water and the light. So keep that in mind too. Again, if you got it on a windowsill around the wintertime, do not forget about it and actually kind of scoot it away from there because the cold, drafty air will kill your plant as well. So just keep that in mind because windows get really drafty and so do doors. So don't forget about your pitcher plants if you've got them sitting over there too. These guys can propagate with stem cutting. I would recommend cutting like the herbaceous stem. It's kind of hit or miss though with those. You can air layer them also, and they can propagate with seed. But the seeds do not store long at all, so be very careful, and when you do get the seeds, I would go ahead and plant them as soon as possible. Fortunately, these plants will eat up a lot of the pests that they could end up occurring. I don't really know of any natural pests that kind of bother these plants, except maybe the aphids that kind of get down in there, but they can eat the aphids too. So really, they don't really have a whole bunch in the way of natural pests, but they can get some that like the kind of wet, mildewy, soggy sphagnum moss. So if you're watering it too much, that can attract some pests. With this guy, I'll probably sit him next to my sundew, so they actually can have the kind of stickiness that will actually kill and capture the bugs. So if you do notice that there's a lot in the way of fungus gnats or aphids, use a sundew that will actually kind of draw the pests in, and once it lands on it, it'll actually stick to it too. But the pitchers are generally pretty good about eating those too. Now I know with this guy, these are considered a medium-sized carnivorous pitcher plant. Generally, the pitchers can get to about 6 inches long. Other than that, I mean, they're just great plants to have. They're really easy to take care of. They don't require a lot in the way of care. You don't have to feed them. The only thing you have to do is probably check the water every day just to make sure it does have water because they can dry out, especially in the smaller size like this. And you can tell this really is a juvenile because it's got the kind of yellowish green pitchers. And as they get older, the pitchers usually kind of change to like a reddish color, and they get even more red based on how much sunlight they're getting. So with the ventricosa, you'll want to make sure that your pitchers do have some red to them. And as I was saying earlier, they do not go dormant, so they really should kind of stay the same all year round. And as it gets bigger though, I'll probably put it in a larger pot. I think this is around a 4 to 6 inch pot, but I will always keep the sphagnum moss down in there too. Because that's really the best way of keeping the roots kind of aerated and letting a whole bunch of water kind of remain down in there around that. Other than that, I really hope this video helps you guys out if you ever do come across one of these easy to care for kind of Nepenthes pitcher plants. They are a tropical pitcher plant. Naturally, they're not found here in America, but nowadays they are. So they're really great plants to have. Like I said, you can watch them. They do capture plants, and that's basically because the inside of the lid to the leaf secretes a really kind of desirable glaze that attracts the pests, and they'll kind of crawl up in there and get on there and start licking it as it secretes it. And if they don't watch their footing, they can actually fall down into the tube where a secretion is then secreted, and then it will actually digest the insect or whatever else kind of falls down in there. Like I said, you don't want the pitchers to dry out, so if they are open, you can kind of spray a little bit of water down in there to kind of help it stay hydrated. But there's nothing really in the way of pests that kind of bother them, except for the ones that do kind of like all the attention from all the water they get. But other than that, they are great plants to have. They're not really poisonous, so you don't have to worry about any of your animals or kids kind of touching on that. And they're a great way to learn. So they're great plants to have. If you guys have any questions or concerns, comment down below and let me know. I'll try my best to answer those and get back to you on that. Other than that, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button or the bell next to it. That way you'll know anytime that I've uploaded a new video. You guys take it easy, have a good one, and don't forget, always plant prudently. Thank you, YouTube.